Well, at the time that this happened, I was attending a Presbyterian day school, and so missionaries were in charge of providing our education, and part of their purpose in that small town in New Mexico was to try to do good things. And one of the things that came up that year was that the internment of the Japanese throughout the country. And so we were told that these Japanese children had been moved from their regular homes to these camps, and that they thought it would be a good idea if we could do something nice for them. And they had thought that one of the things we could do was send each child a gift. And so we were asked to bring a dime to school to buy a gift to mail to these children in the camp. And so they laid out all of these different gifts that we could choose to mail to these children. And I don't remember what I chose, but I know we all of us sent the gifts, and several weeks later we received a response. Most of the children in the class, this was a very small class, like 15 students, received letters from the other children, and we could decide to respond or not. And it was a very exciting thing in this little community, because it was a different address. So it was used as an educational event for the teachers and for the students. So we continued corresponding. I happened to get 2 letters. I happened to pick up, because we could pick up from the letters, we could pick up whatever, and I happened to pick 2 letters, and so I responded to both letters. It was fun to write and fun to receive something, and I continued writing to Reiko, and I would say that we wrote through junior high, because I have a picture of her that she sent, and I think it's a junior high picture, and then I tried to locate her much later when I came to California to teach and work in California. I tried to find her, and but I couldn't find her, and so a couple of years ago, this one former superintendent was in New Mexico, and we went to Los Alamos, and there was this big exhibit concerning the internment of the Japanese throughout the United States. And so we went through it, and it was very interesting to Dr. Mend, and we started talking about that period, and I told them about this pen pal I had as a child, and Mary Mend says, "I think I know that name. I think that sounds familiar. I'll go look it up and let you know." And so that's how it happened. She sent me her address, and Reiko wrote, and we started the process again. We were told that they had been moved to a camp. But our experience with camps was going out and camping and living in tents and fishing and those kinds of things. And we were told it was in Wyoming. And I sort of remember that they showed us some pictures of the state of Wyoming, things like that. But no, we were not given any information to get any impression that it was like a prison. And see, when Reiko corresponded with me, I continued holding that image, a camping image. When Frances wrote and she complained, things got a little bit confusing. And I remember discussing the matter with my parents, and I remember my father saying, I don't think you should continue corresponding with her. And I don't think she wants to keep writing to you. I think the last letter that Frances sent, the way that she had written, my parents I thought, and so that was the end of the correspondence with Francis. So it was it was never very clear what was happening, I don't think. I think it was the following Christmas or Easter or something, and I made some cookies to send to my pen pals. See, we were all well, there were other children who were also writing to others, and so we decided it would be fun to bake some cookies and send them to the camp, and we would address them to the person that we were writing to. So I sent some cookies to Reiko, and I sent some cookies to Francis. Well, Reiko was very grateful for the cookies and all of that, and she wrote a very nice letter. But Francis was not grateful for the cookies, and I don't remember exactly what she wrote about, what she pictured of the camp. But in any case, I remember that my image of the camp was tainted. Now, all of a sudden I realized that my image, my original image of the camp was not the way that I had it. So and my parents read the letters too, and so I remember conversing and discussing Francis's letter and finally agreeing that Francis's letter was sort of a closure kind of letter, and that maybe I should continue writing.
On the topic of cookies, what I didn't tell Flora Ida until 2 years ago, and she said, "Why did you wait till today to tell me this?" I received a little box of cookies, like in a little note box, and I knew something was wrong because the bottom corner had a hole in it. So by the time I opened it up, all that was left inside was cookie crumbs and just little bits and pieces of cookies, but lots of mouse droppings. And I tell the story to the 5th graders, and you know what the 5th graders say? "What are mouse droppings?" And so I say, "There's BMs, bowel movements, ooh." So then the next part of the story is even worse, because I said, "You know what? It had been so long since we had really had cookies, real cookies, anything good. I couldn't bear to throw that stuff away. There were just enough crumbs, and you could get a little taste. How many of you boys and girls would even try to eat those cookies, crumbs?" And the kids are going, "Ooh." And I said, "I did." And they're really going, "Ooh," now. And the idea was, I blew it off as much as I could, wiped off as much as I could, and I ate the leftover crumbs and stuff. And I figured that to the children, to justify my action. Do you know, when you have gone without something so long, you have deprived yourself, you've been deprived, you start acting in a different way. Your standards of living change, your standards of everything change. And so, when you see somebody acting a little strange and a little bit different, maybe they're going through a hard time. And I didn't get sick. So that's what I remember. And she says, "Why didn't you tell me? I would have sent you some more cookies."
I never knew about all of that. In retrospect, see, it gives an idea of the situation and how there were different ways of reacting to those different situations. See, we were totally in the dark about the real situation, but it came through by the reaction of these two different individuals, Reiko and Francis. So I think I was fortunate because I got to see how it could be, how individuals react positively to a negative situation, but also how a normal individual wants to express the reality of the situation. And see, at that age, I got that picture. My parents probably understood more than I did, but they wouldn't have told me.
I think part of the difference between us too was I think that I tried to deny a lot in terms of my own culture. I didn't want to be Japanese. I had the face, what can you do? I didn't want people on the outside to know that I was in a camp, that I was Japanese. Now, I came from Hollywood, and what I did was I was a movie star addict. Used to go to the movies a lot. But when I was in camp, I somehow wrote to movie stars, "Dear Lana Turner, please send me an autograph picture. Thank you very much, sincerely, Reiko," and I put my address. Well, they might be able to figure out by the address. It's very strange. So I was Virginia to 68 movie stars, and I got Dear Virginia autographs on these, Joan Crawford, Tyrone Power, whatever. Well, I figured out after about a year that being Virginia doesn't make me more American. I'm still Japanese. So I went back to being Reiko. I didn't tell anybody in camp my name was Virginia, just people outside. Years later, when I was in college, I somehow picked up a British girl, older than I, in a pen pal relationship, and she let me know that she was just crazy about film stars. I said, "I've got this wonderful collection, you can have the whole thing." So I sent her this box, 68 autographed signatures and everything, all saying to Virginia. She writes back, and she was just delirious about how wonderful all this was. But who is Virginia? I was so embarrassed, I could not explain to her why I would have used a different name that had nothing to do with me. It was not even my middle name. I made it up because I didn't want to be Japanese at one time. So I may have denied in my own head how bad things were, how sad I was, because I've said before to the history group, that was the saddest period in my life. I have never been as homesick as I was. I was with my mother and all my siblings, all 8 of us family members together. I have never been as lonely as I was, and I cried and cried and cried a lot. The grieving process started in the train going from Los Angeles to Wyoming. And I've lived in foreign countries and places I didn't know a soul, and in cities that I don't know a soul. I have never been as homesick as I was with my family in Heart Mountain. So that denial thing came really early, and that may be part of the picture with Frances. She says I talked about school. I can remember the school very well, and all the things we learned and what we talked about. So that was probably the positive side of whatever we did.
I think the first indication that something wasn't quite right in the way I had visualized all this was when Frances wrote the letter. But so then I think it was probably that following year when in actuality the teachers did tell us about the internment camps and all of that. So by the time I started getting pictures from her and everything, I had a pretty fair idea of what had happened. And of course, by the end of the war, all of that was wide open. Everybody knew about it. But I think for a period there, I fantasized.